Welcome to the College Investor Audio Show, where we talk about the biggest issues impacting millennial money, from student loan debt to side hustles to building wealth. We will show you how to get out of debt so that you can build real wealth for the future.
Talking 529 plans today on the show, basically student loan repayment using 529s. Let's get right to it. So families can now use 529 college savings plans to pay off all or part of their student loans. Pretty cool. The Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act of 2019, holy cow, say that 5 times fast, also known as the Secure Act, I like that name a lot better, changed the definition of qualified distributions from a 529 plan to allow 529s to be used to repay the principal and or interest on qualified education loans of the beneficiary and the beneficiary's siblings. There are some limits on using 529 plans to repay student loans, though. Qualified distributions are limited to $10,000 per borrower. This is a lifetime limit that applies to distributions from all 529 plans. So, you can't bypass the limit by taking distributions from multiple 529 plans. Darn it! For example, if you have a parent-owned 529 and a grandparent-owned plan for the same beneficiary, and take a $10,000 distribution from each to repay the beneficiary's student loans, $10,000 of the $20,000 in distributions will not be qualified. The beneficiary is limited to a maximum of $10,000 in student loan repayment from both 529s combined. The borrower can't bypass the $10,000 limit by having 2 or more plans. Similarly, if you have 2 parent-owned 529s, one for the beneficiary and one for the beneficiary's sibling, at most $10,000 combined from the 2 529s can be used to repay the beneficiary's student loans. Likewise, once a borrower receives $10,000 in total qualified distributions to repay the borrower's student loans, no further distributions to repay the borrower's student loans will be qualified. It's a lifetime limit, not an annual limit. The $10,000 limit is per borrower, not per 529. So if a borrower receives $10,000 in 529 plan distributions to repay their loans and then refinances the remaining debt into someone else's name, like a spouse, the new loan might be eligible for another $10,000 in qualified distributions. Might, the key word, provided the new borrower has not yet reached that $10,000 limit for their own student loans. The definition of sibling includes brothers, sisters, stepbrothers, and stepsisters, by the way. 529 plans can repay parent loans too. This is important. The account owner can change the beneficiary to a parent or use this to pay off up to $10,000 of parent education loans too. If each parent has borrowed parent loans, the account owner can change the beneficiary from one parent to the other to pay off the parent's education loans. Since the $10,000 limit is per borrower, it doesn't matter if the parent has parent loans for their children and student loans for their own children. The total of the qualified distributions is limited to $10,000 across all education loans. So that also begs the question, do all student loans qualify for this? So the definition of qualified education loan includes all federal loans and most private student loans, but some private loans don't qualify for this. To be considered a qualified education loan, the loan must satisfy 8 different requirements. So, to list them all here in this podcast can get a little bit confusing. You can see the list of all 8 qualifications inside this article. Just copy and paste the title of this podcast in the search bar at thecollegeinvestor.com. By the way, some states do not conform to federal rules. So some states have not adopted the federal definition of qualified expenses. Accordingly, using a 529 plan distribution to repay student loans may be considered non-qualified by the state, even if it is considered qualified by the IRS. The earnings portion of such a distribution may be subject to state income tax. There may also be recapture of any state income tax breaks that are attributable to the non-qualified distribution. Let's take a look at the impact on the student loan interest deduction. The IRS does not allow you to double dip here. A coordination restriction reduces eligibility for the student loan interest deduction when a borrower's student loans are repaid using a qualified distribution from a 529 college savings plan. The student loan interest deduction provides taxpayers with an above-the-line exclusion from income for up to $2,500 in interest paid on qualified education loans. The amount of interest eligible for the student loan interest deduction is reduced by the earnings portion of the 529 plan distribution that is used to repay the borrower's qualified education loans. Let's take a look at an example. Suppose that a third of the 529 plan distribution comes from earnings. If the beneficiary receives a $10,000 distribution to repay student loans, $3,333 of the distribution will come from earnings. Since $3,333 exceeds $2,500, the borrower will not be eligible to claim the student loan interest deduction that year. Dagnabbit. On the other hand, if only 10% of the distribution was earnings, or the distribution amount was just $3,000, eligibility for the student loan interest deduction would be reduced by $1,000, leaving the borrower eligible to claim up to $1,500 in loan interest deduction on their federal income tax return. The earnings portion of a 529 plan distribution is proportional too. Unlike a Roth IRA, the account owner cannot take a distribution of just contributions. However, if there are multiple 529 plans, the account owner could choose to take a distribution to repay student loans from the 529 plan with the lowest percentage earnings to maximize eligibility for the student loan interest deduction. That is our show for today. A little bit of a quick hitter, but you can dive a little bit deeper into this and so much more about 529 plans at thecollegeinvestor.com. Again, just type in 529. You'll probably find a bunch of great articles for you. Thanks again so much for stopping by today. We'll talk to you again real soon.